working except for YouTube, so they can't see our faces.
We are live.
Oh, we're live. Okay, great. All resolved.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone to the Committee on Taxation. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We had a little bit of that this morning, but we're ready to start. Have public hearings scheduled for several bills, and we'll start with introductions, and we will begin with Senator Pouliot.
Hey, good morning. State Senator Matt Pouliot, represent Senate District 15, the towns of Augusta, China, Oakland City, and Bassboro.
Excellent. Is Representative Bickford with us? I don't see him. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I'm Mickey Carmichael from House District 137, and I represent 22 communities in Hancock, Washington, and Penobscot counties.
Okay, I don't see Representative Collins. Representative Gramlich.
Morning. Thank you, Senator Chipman. I am Lori Gramlich, and I represent House District 13, which is the lovely seaside community of Old Orchard Beach, and I will be one of those folks who have to leave right around 10. I have a bill in the Environmental Committee. Thank you.
Excellent. And Representative Hanley.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Senator. I'm Jeff Hanley. I represent District 87, which is Pittston, Alna, Wiscasset, and Randolph.
And Representative Kryzak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Ted Kryzak. I represent District 20, Acton, Lebanon, and part of Shapley.
Excellent. And Representative Matlack.
Good morning. I'm Ann Matlack. I represent House District 92, which includes the communities of Cushing, Thomaston, South Thomaston, St. George, Matunicus, Cree Haven, and the Muscle Ridge Islands.
And Representative Perry.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Joe Perry. I represent part of Bangor and part of Orono in the main house.
All right, Representative Sachs.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Melanie Sachs. I'm honored to represent House District 48, which is Freeport and part of Pownell.
And Representative Terry.
Good morning. I'm Representative Mo Terry. I represent the District 26, the west part of Gorham, and I serve as House Chair.
All right, and I'm Senator Ben Chipman. I represent Senate District 27, which is part of the city of Portland, serve as Senate Chair of the committee. Also with us this morning is Avery Page, our committee clerk, and Julie Jones, our committee analyst. So we're going to jump right into some public hearings on bills. Just so folks know the order of the bills, we're going to start with LD 1418, sponsored by Senator Lucchini. We'll also directly after him hear from Representative Sylvester to introduce LD 1342, and we'll take testimony from the public on one or the other or both of those bills at the same time. And then from there, because they're similar in topic, and then from there, we'll go to LD, back to the top of the list I'm looking at here, which is LD 1140, followed by 1277, followed by 1362, 1381, 1395, 1468, and then finishing out with LD 1162 and 1371. All of our testimony is being broadcast live through YouTube and through audio online. And we will ask folks who are testifying, other than the sponsors who don't have a time limit, but the public, please keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you approach 3 minutes and you're still speaking, we'll ask for a final thought. And by that, we mean a sentence or two to conclude your testimony, and then there'll be an opportunity to answer questions from members of the committee. So with that, we will start with opening up the public hearing on LD 1418. And we're ready to hear from Senator Lucchini to introduce this bill to us. And following him, we'll hear from Representative Sylvester. Welcome, Senator Lucchini.
Good morning. Good to see everybody. Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. My name is Louis Lucchini, and I represent most of Hancock County in the state Senate. And I'm here to present LD 1418, an act to allow a local option sales tax on meals and lodging. So I've submitted this legislation at the request of the town of Bar Harbor. As many of you know, Bar Harbor is a small town of a little over 5,000 people, situated on MDI next to Acadia National Park. Each year, Acadia, Bar Harbor, the MDI region draw in millions of visitors, with much of that coming in the summer months. So this huge visitation places tremendous pressure on the area's infrastructure, the roads, sidewalk, local parks, water and sewer. And it also increases demand on public services like police, firemen, emergency medical services, as well as the needs at the local hospital. So Bar Harbor receives very little in revenue sharing, despite the significant sales tax collected. So most of these extra costs end up getting picked up by the local property taxpayers. And I believe people from Bar Harbor may either be here, I've written testimony explaining their financial situation better than I could articulate. So establishing a local option sales tax would help offset this financial burden placed on residents of highly touristed towns like Bar Harbor. And under this legislation, it would require local approval for this new local option tax is accepted by a referendum vote of the municipality. And it would also have to spell out the rate of taxation as well as specifics on how the additional tax revenue would be spent. So thank you for considering this proposal. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And thanks to the chairs for putting me first, as I've got another committee going at the same time. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Lucchini. Is there any questions from members of the committee for Senator Lucchini? Seeing none, thank you for being with us and presenting the bill.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll now hear from Representative Sylvester. We'll open up the public hearing on LD 1342. And we'll hear from Representative Sylvester to speak in presenting that bill. And then following Representative Sylvester, we will hear from Kim Cook, who is here to speak in support. I believe she's in the waiting room. Go ahead, Representative Sylvester.
Thank you so much. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, esteemed members of the Committee on Taxation. My name is Representative Mike Sylvester, and I'm here to introduce LD 1342, an act to authorize a local option sales tax on lodging and other goods, provide funding to tax abatement and rental relief. Today, you will hear a couple of bills regarding local option sales tax. We just heard from Senator Lucchini. In fact, LD 1418 is the version of the bill that I submitted in the 128th legislature, which passed out of this committee, ought to pass as amended. That bill had the virtue of having a new formulation, which kept the majority of the money raised by municipalities in the municipalities which levied the tax, but attempted to share the remainder with all other municipalities. I presented a similarly structured bill in the 129th, which ultimately limited itself to only lodging, and also passed out of this committee, ought to pass as amended, and passed through the House of Representatives twice, but died days before being voted in the Senate as we adjourned for COVID. That lost bill had achieved the pledges of the necessary votes for Senate passage based on an amendment, which was inadvertently omitted from the final draft of LD 1342. We all know how crazy that the submission process was this time, but which I submitted to you yesterday. LD 1342 is that version of the bill. So what does LD 1342 do? It allows municipalities to create a 1% local option tax on lodging or other goods. As you see in section 3 and 9 of the amendment, the tax must be approved by a local referendum with a simple majority. In section 4 of the amendment, omitted from the original bill, is the other goods mentioned in the bill's title. Any other goods besides lodging must be approved by a referendum which reaches a 60% affirmative vote. 90% of the money raised by the local option sales tax would then be distributed to the municipality levying the tax, while 10% of the total would be sent to the Maine State Housing Authority for rental assistance and property tax abatement. Maine State Housing Authority would create the program and write the rules in order to comply with federal HUD and HHS rules. In short, we would be allowing many municipalities to raise much needed income and to help all municipalities keep people and to place people in homes. Bills often have an interesting life of their own. And in crafting LD 1342, I certainly had the history of my past bills and the conversations that I've had in this committee in mind. For will Senator Chipman and Representatives Terry and Cloutier have helped me shape my thoughts on this bill, for which I am very grateful. Yet it was actually Senator Pouliot and some quick math that we did on Mike, something I tried desperately never to do, that shaped the bill in its present form. We realized that the kind of distribution I had envisioned in the 128th and in that bill in the 129th might not amount to much for smaller municipalities. For some, it might be under $10,000. So I asked myself over the long COVID summer, how could a little bit of money go a long way? That is how I landed on rental relief and tax abatement. People who get into trouble with their property taxes are often talking about the amounts in the hundreds or low thousands. This program could allow municipalities of all sizes, which often try to reach over backwards to help property tax owners stay in their home, clear the debt rather than prolonging it or forgiving it. Towns can have a strategy to apply for the program early in the tax debt rather than after it has spiraled out of control. We talk a lot in this legislature about keeping people in their homes. This program from that 10% does so directly. For renters, the problem is finding housing stock that people can afford using the voucher program. We have a backlog of over 25,000 people waiting to receive vouchers, and yet we build new affordable housing stock in the dozens. One of the problems is using a voucher is the difference between, and using a voucher is the actual difference between market cost and the voucher amount. The average voucher statewide is for $7,500 a year, or around $625 a month. How many apartments near you go for that? What I've been discussing with Maine State Housing Authority, but have not prescribed in this bill, is a program that would help meet the difference between the voucher amount and the market price. Imagine the number of landlords really willing to rent to folks with vouchers if they knew the difference was covered for a year or longer. Once again, this program would move people directly from the wait list with that 10% and into homes. And we all know that housing is the driver for setting a person on a sound economic footing. So as to the other reasons for enacting a local option sales tax, I think they are clear, and Senator Lucchini nailed most of them. We face unprecedented times. However, municipalities are facing budget shortfalls that they may or may not be able to clear with targeted federal programs, and the state has its own issues. Large municipalities are the service centers for much of the public good, which the state only partially funds. These municipalities also carry the burden of police, fire, roads, and emergency for the bulk of the tourist visitors who come each year, and yet they raise no local money from those visits. Our schools, our roads, and our local businesses all need support and repairs from the municipalities, yet they must wait for the largest of the state with no home rule option to raise money from local goods. So what about these goods? LD 1324's simple majority referendum is levied against lodging so as to target the tax to tourists. It would seem fair to most Mainers that I've talked to that the cost of municipal budget shortfalls should be borne by tourists rather than by raising property taxes people already can't afford. Now, there will be a long line of people behind me who will declare that no tourist will ever again darken our doorstep if we enact a 1% tax on lodging. We know this isn't true because states and municipalities across the country have often twice, at both levels, have enacted far larger taxes, and people still come, stay, and barely notice their taxes on their bill. We will hear about the tough year that the industry has had. And yes, we've all had a tough year. But in speaking with the lodging industry around me, the PPP helped most of them through. Bookings are solid through the summer, and weddings are booked out years in advance. If there is an area where that is not true, one would assume their residents would take these matters into consideration as the tourist industry supports most local economies in these areas who would enact such a tax. Me, I trust the voters. Even the ones who thought it would be a good idea to elect all of us lot, I trust them to be thoughtful when enacting a local option tax. As to the other goods mentioned in the bill, if 60% of the voters of any town vote to tax something, then by God, to my mind, they ought to have the right to do it. This could include the prepared foods mentioned in my previous two bills and Senator Lucchini's LD 1418, or any other good not prohibited by state law. I have not precluded exemptions to the local law, including making it seasonal and local exceptions. If the committee feels we need to be clearer about that, I'd be happy to offer further amendment. Yet here is what is most important to me about this bill, or really any bill I write. This bill keeps true to this state's fundamental values: helping our neighbors, sharing resources statewide, and home rule. As the last year has shown, we all need a helping hand sometimes. And this bill allowed towns and cities to pay their bills while putting and keeping people in their homes. Not every municipality will be able or frankly want to enact a local option tax. Yet all should share in our largest industry. And the municipalities and its citizens, the core around which our Constitution would base, should be able to self-determine their destinies. For what good is home rule if you are unable to raise your own revenue. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Representative Sylvester, for that great presentation. We have a question from Representative Gramlich.
Thank you, Senator Chipman. Thank you, Representative Sylvester, for bringing this this important issue in front of our committee. Just to be clear, if I'm understanding correctly, if we in my community of Old Orchard Beach were to implement and vote on a 1% increase in lodging, we in our municipality would be getting 90% of that back, first of all, and I want to make sure that's accurate. And then secondarily, that 10% allocation that would go to Main State Housing, you might have mentioned in your testimony, but I think I might have missed it if you did. How does that 10% get allocated and appropriated, certainly throughout the state? Because we know that through Main State Housing, there is a pretty lengthy waiting list, particularly for people who are waiting for Section 8 vouchers. Sometimes it's up to 8 years. So I'm just curious how that 10% is going to be appropriated. And I will catch your answer on YouTube because I need to be in ENR 10 minutes ago. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Representative. And so, yes, it is correct that the 90% would stay with the municipality. In the original two versions, in the 128th and 129th, I started once with 25%, I believe, in the one at one point in one bill, and 15 in the other. 10% seemed to be the place where the committee was comfortable, and was the amendment that was that passed the House and was ready to pass the Senate. And so 90% would stay, 10% would go to Main State Housing. There's a lot of money that's coming in for housing. It gets allocated in a lot of different ways. And so I didn't want to be prescriptive in this bill in exactly how Main State Housing would use the program. But I think that one of the things that is a major loophole, both in the 200 million that came in earlier, and it looks like also might be in the 150 million, which is coming later, is that there is no way to fill that gap, that market gap between what a voucher gives you. So in some, it's less than $625 a month. In some municipalities, it's a little higher. It gets into the 800s, for example, usually in Portland. But there's no apartment available for that price. Certainly not in my district, and in many of the districts in the state. And many folks are worried about bringing people in with vouchers because they worry about what happens if the voucher goes away, what happens if something happens to their housing stock, what happens if the rules change. And so being able to know as a landlord that not only do you have the voucher, but you have the extra market amount that allows you to get what you are asking for the apartment seems to me to be a really good way to move people off of vouchers and or to add additional vouchers. There we have several bills in the Housing Committee to create new voucher programs, but to be able to have additional funding to put people into houses. As regards to tax abatement, as I said, many towns already bend over backwards, but they end up eating a lot of the bill for people to keep people in their homes. And what this tries to do is it allows municipalities to apply to the fund to have that bill paid. And so at some early point where someone says, I cannot pay my bill, a municipality could apply to the fund to have the hundreds of dollars that can spiral into thousands of dollars to have with levies or with penalties and interest to allow those folks to clear their debt and get themselves back on footing. So that's the intent of the bill. And then again, with the goods and services, lodging is a 50% majority vote that the bill authorized. But then if any municipality in their wisdom has some other item, for example, like meals and prepared foods, that they wanted to put a 1% tax on, they would be able to vote, and with a 60% majority, an overwhelming majority in any referendum, that town would be able to enact any other good. I hope that was clear.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? So Representative Sylvester, I know there's some differences between this bill and the previous bill, the 1418. Do you think there's a way that those two bills can be kind of merged together into one bill? Or do you think there's too many differences and maybe we shouldn't try to do something like that?
As always, I am happy to work with this committee to come out with a bill that it can support and, with the strongest support possible. If that committee felt that we needed to move to 15%, if we felt we needed to move meals and lodge and prepared foods into this bill, I am happy if we needed to make exceptions. The way that I see it right now, it says you can implement a 1% tax. It does not say that you can't, for example, make it seasonal. It doesn't say that I've had interesting conversations with restaurants who said, could we do like a meal club for locals and have some sort of exception where if you were part of this meal club, you wouldn't, all of those things, the way that I read the bill, it says they can enact a tax. It does not prescribe what must be in that tax, except that it levies a 1% on a specific good.
So there's lots of options, and it sounds good.
There's lots of options. I know we're coming to the end here, but we've worked this bill a few times, so I think we can be really quick if the committee has will to bring it in one direction or another.
Excellent. Well, seeing no additional questions, appreciate you presenting the bill to us today. Thank you for that. So I don't think there's any co-sponsors here to speak on either of these bills, so we'll now open up testimony to those who want to speak in support, which I believe Kim Cook is here with us to speak in support of one or both of these bills. If we could bring Kim Cook in, and then also if Kate Dufour is in the waiting room, if we could bring her in to speak after Kim, that would be great.
I've just promoted Kim Cook. She'll be in cyberspace for a second. And I don't see Kate Dufour.
So it looks like Kim Cook is now with us. Welcome, Ms. Cook. We're ready to hear your testimony in support.
Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Sylvester, and esteemed members of the committee. I'm Kim Cook. I'm here on behalf, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Representative Sylvester. It's Representative Terry. Forgive me, Representative Terry.
That's okay. I've been here to much worse.
I'm Kim Cook. I'm here on behalf of the Mayor's Coalition in support of both LD 1342 and LD 1418, and would like to thank both sponsors, both Senator Lucchini and Representative Sylvester, on their work on these bills. And as you've heard, Representative Sylvester's worked for many years on behalf of this cause, and we appreciate his efforts. The Mayor's Coalition is a nonpartisan group that was formed in 2012 and currently includes the mayors of 9 Maine communities: Augusta, Biddeford, Lewiston, Portland, Rockland, Saco, Sanford, South Portland, and Westbrook, with a combined population of nearly 250,000 people. The coalition advocates for state and federal policies that recognize the important role that Maine cities play in providing vital services to Maine people from across our state, and the positive impact Maine cities have on the economic strength of our whole state. The coalition seeks to work in partnership with Maine state and federal officials to meet the needs of all Maine people. Maine law gives municipalities few revenue options other than the property tax. Municipalities are required to fund schools, essential services, roads, and so much more by either adjustments to property taxes or by cutting services and neglecting infrastructure. Additionally, the Mayor's Coalition communities serve as a resource and service centers for our neighboring towns and regions, which places additional cost burdens on our residents of our communities. As evidenced over the years, revenue sharing and education funding are the first to be cut during economic setbacks and have consistently been underfunded. These financial shortcomings have left our cities with millions of fewer dollars than we are due. These bills propose a limited local option sales tax of 1% on a narrow subset of leisure activities, mainly lodging and meals. Currently, Maine is one of only 12 states nationwide that does not allow for a local option sales tax. That's evidence that visitors will not be deterred from coming to Maine, as some might suggest. You'll likely hear from others that now is not the time to institute a local option sales tax. But we want to remind you that you're not instituting any new tax through these bills. If either of these bills becomes law, taxes would not increase 1 penny. Only the voters of a given municipality could impose the tax within their own community. You're simply allowing the voters that option. Communities should have this option to decide what they believe is in the best interest of their communities and to help cover the additional costs that both tourists and as service centers, the entire regions cause within our communities. We urge the committee to work on these proposals and to find common ground that allows municipalities in Maine to join municipalities in 38 other states who raise revenue this way. We appreciate your time and consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I'd also like to draw your attention to the testimony and support by the Maine Municipal Association. Kate Dufour indicated that she and her team are in quite a number of other committees this morning and didn't expect that they were going to be able to tune in to provide their testimony in person, but asked me to reference it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Questions from members of the committee. Representative Collins.
Hi, good morning, Ms. Cook. Thank you for testifying in front of this committee. Do you know, could you tell the committee your thoughts? Why has there been opposition to this? I don't quite understand. If a community needs additional funding for different circumstances, for example, Portland, we get so much of the state's homeless population, and we have a huge education, infrastructure. We have lots of immigrants and refugees we take in, so we really could use a lot of money. So why would someone in some other community be opposed to us doing what we need to do to help our community?
I'm probably not the best one to make the arguments about why certain communities wouldn't want this. And again, any community who didn't want it would not enact it. So I don't think there's a lot of risk, to tell you the truth, of giving local communities the option, especially considering you are actually giving the voters in those communities this particular option. Now, there may be businesses and industries who would rather us not have that local option, but we have to recognize the increased cost. As Senator Lucchini, I can't put it any better than he did for the community of Bar Harbor. I think everybody can understand the additional costs for police and other services within that community, and that happens all over the state. And then, of course, with service centers, you're absolutely right, Representative Collins, that service center communities, not just Portland, but all of the communities within the Mayor's Coalition and beyond, have additional costs that they cover. Their populations grow during the day because people come to these communities to work, they come there to go to the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. And so this to us is simply allowing that option that is allowed in the vast majority of states by local communities. And we all have paid these local option sales taxes when we go to other states and other communities. And we've seen them, we've paid them, and we don't stay away. People from Maine don't not visit other states that have these. In fact, they probably don't even know they've paid them. And that would be the case here in Maine. So thank you for the question.
Excellent. Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Cook. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And I know that Kate Dufour did want to speak. I understand she's not here and has another commitment. If there's anyone else that's in the waiting room that wants to speak in support, if you could just kind of wave your hand so that Avery can see you and we can let you in. I'm not looking at the waiting room, but is there anybody, Avery, that is there that wants to speak in support before we move on to other testimony?
I would suggest electronically raising their hand. I can.
Right. Yeah. I'm not seeing anyone doing that though.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I don't know how the waiting room works, but that sounds fine. So seeing that there's no one else here to speak in support, I know we did get quite a bit of testimony and support that members can look at, encourage folks to look at that as well between now and the work session, but we'll now move over to testimony in opposition. And we will start with Ben Lucas, followed by Greg Dougal, again, asking folks to speak to one or the other or both of these bills at the same time. And so we'll begin with in opposition with Ben Lucas, followed by Greg Dougal. Let me see, Mr. Lucas is with us. Welcome, Mr. Lucas.
Yes, good morning. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, members of the Committee on Taxation. My name is Ben Lucas. I live in Portland, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Maine Jobs Council. I am here today to testify in opposition to LDs 1342 and 1418. Passing a local option sales tax will increase the overall tax burden in Maine. Currently, Maine has the 4th highest tax burden in the United States. This is a combination of high property taxes, high income taxes, and already high sales and excise taxes. This legislation would raise taxes even higher, put us at a greater disadvantage, and make Maine less likely to attract jobs, investment, and innovation. A report from Oxford Economics recently ranked Maine #1 in the nation for economic vulnerability from the pandemic. The reason for this are our percentage of small businesses and their limited ability to cope, our aging workforce, and our dependence on tourism and retail. For these reasons, the Maine Jobs Council opposes any new taxes or any tax increases. Small business is the backbone of Maine's economy, and this legislation would do considerable harm to a sector that is vital, vulnerable, and already suffered from recent events. Last week, the Revenue Forecasting Committee projected Maine's income to increase by $462 million this year and $460 million next year. That is far better than the projections when the COVID-19 pandemic began. There is also a record amount of money coming into Maine from the federal government, and there is pending legislation dealing with municipal revenue sharing, including a bill that passed the Senate and House last week. There is no need to increase taxes, and we should instead be focusing on passing legislation that helps us be more competitive with the New England region. We also have concerns about individual municipalities choosing to enact a local option sales tax and others not doing so. We feel this is bad public policy, and legislation should be focused on addressing a statewide comprehensive plan. We have economic challenges all across the state, and we should be addressing legislation that helps address all areas. A patchwork of taxes sends a difficult message to investors looking to relocate to Maine and Maine-based companies looking to expand. This could hurt foundational job growth, investment, and innovation, all of which are critical to helping solve the pending workforce crisis in Maine and help our economy grow. In closing, I'd like to note that this is a regressive tax, and low-income Mainers will be particularly hard hit if this legislation passes. They live in the municipalities as well, and they don't have the mobility options that others do to travel to different communities. The Maine Jobs Council encourages this committee to vote ought not to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Any questions from members of the committee? I guess I would just ask, you talked about how we shouldn't have a patchwork approach and more of a statewide approach to resolving the issue, I guess, of revenue and our economy. What kind of statewide policies would you support that would bring in the revenue we need to address the infrastructure issues and things like that across the state?
Well, that's a good question, Senator Chipman, and thank you for that. We heard a lot from our members about this because we do have members that are statewide and they exist in individual municipalities. So from the employer perspective, it's hard to be able to predict what's going to happen in different municipalities. But I think in general, as we're looking as winding down and putting the pandemic behind us, we should be trying to keep Maine as attractive as a place as possible for people to come to and people to do business. So I think that's how we would look at that specific issue.
So there's really no statewide policies that would generate any revenue that you would support?
Well, I mean, we've been supporting policies and comprehensive plans that address statewide concerns and issues. I don't have a specific policy off the top of my head that I could point to. I'd be certainly happy to put some more time into thinking about it and get back in touch with you.
Yeah, if you could, because I mean, you talked about the patchwork approach of different cities and towns having different policies on a local option, and how it would be better to have a statewide approach. And I assumed you were talking about a statewide approach to revenue. So I'm just curious what, if any, policies on statewide approach to revenue that you'd support. I mean, it sounds like you're maybe not supportive of any statewide revenue policies, but if you are, I'd be curious to know what those are, because we could work together on that.
Yeah, thank you. And I should clarify as well, what we're looking at when we're talking about a statewide policy is Currently, Maine has some of the highest operating costs in the region for doing business. Our economic ranks tend to be towards the bottom half of the country and specifically in the New England region. So we're specifically looking at how overall statewide we can work to make Maine a more competitive place to do business, because we feel there are certain areas that we lag behind. And we think that overall approach is going to be very critical to helping solve the workforce crisis that's about to incur in Maine. I mean, we have in the next 5 years, I think 158,000 open jobs that are going to be available. That's a serious concern and definitely going to have a negative impact on the state's long-term economy. So I'd be more than happy to put some more thought into it and get in touch with you.
Yeah, and just one final question. I know we've got other people to speak, but do you think that having, better quality roads, bridges, better transportation infrastructure, better quality education system to train workers to be ready for the future and things like that, which all cost money, would make Maine more competitive?
I do.
Okay. We just got to figure out how to raise the money to do that.
Correct. Yeah. I totally agree. And, we just feel that, putting an increased burden on small businesses that have been struggling so much is not the best way to do it. But we're certainly committed to better roads, better bridges, supporting municipalities, finding some other ways to do so.
Excellent. Appreciate your testimony, and thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Senator.
Excellent. So we'll now hear from Greg Dougal, who's here to speak in opposition, followed by James Kitchen. Welcome, Mr. Dougal.
Thank you, Senator Chipman. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and distinguished members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Greg Dougal, and I'm here on behalf of Hospitality Maine and our 1,000 restaurant and lodging members, and I'm sure this will shock you, to speak in opposition to LDs 1342 and 1418 for many times, and 3 times against Representative Sylvester's bills. The hospitality industry has just suffered through the worst year in its history based on travel and capacity restrictions due to the pandemic that has levied a very personal human toll for small hospitality businesses and their employees in the state. The idea of adding another tax in such a difficult time is disheartening. The state has more money in its coffers than it thought it would, as Mr. Lucas said, in this fiscal year, according to the Consensus Revenue Forecasting Committee, and received billions of dollars in funds from the federal government to use as seen fit by the governor and the legislature. And she certainly made some of those announcements yesterday. Biennial budget ramps up municipal revenue sharing to 5%, where we all agree it should be. Why should the state set its sights on an industry that has climbed back from the precipice? Our industry was off 36% for lodging sales and 26% for restaurant sales in 2020. Don't we deserve a period of leniency so that we can get back on our feet, be successful, and continue to provide sizable sums of money to the general fund at much higher consumption tax rates than other industries in Maine? These additional tax collections are used by all residents of the state. Taxation is like any other expense to the consumer. It can reduce the level of economic activity by having to pay more tax to the state. In this case, increase or sustained visitation to restaurants and inns in Maine. There is a threshold when crossed, especially in larger transactions, weddings, group dinners, room blocks, that will diminish returns generated by our industry. We believe double-digit taxation on lodging to be just that, and that would be what it is, 10%, crossing the line. We believe singling out an industry in this way is wrong. Taxing meals and lodging with the local options has to make Maine a less affordable vacation destination. Our state lodging tax is already at a high level. Only 5 states have a state lodging tax greater than ours. Unfortunately, we have driven the state rate so high that it makes adding to it with a local options tax problematic. On the meals tax, more populous states in New England have lower state meal taxes, and Connecticut and New Hampshire have no local options taxes at all. Also remember that regardless of how the tax is imposed seasonally or year-round, it also affects Maine residents, considering that 70% of all meals are consumed in Maine's restaurants by Maine residents. I hear people say all the time that nobody notices the tax when they're going on vacation. At some point they will. Are double-digit taxes that point? We believe they are. There are limitations of what the market will bear, and we believe we are fast approaching that limit. The meals tax in Massachusetts is only 6.25%, with the ability to add 3/4 of a point for the local community. The most populous and arguably the wealthiest state in New England has a combined meals tax of 1 point lower than ours already. Connecticut and Rhode Island are at 7 or slightly above. And just to sort of address something that came up, at least in my opinion, one thing we fail to remember is local communities do have strains. I do understand that. And I know the pandemic has been difficult for them, but nobody has been given a pass on their property taxes that I know of in communities as it relates to commercial property or lodging specifically. And usually lodging properties in a lot of communities like Bar Harbor are the highest property taxpayers. So there is a benefit to the community to have these people, I mean, these businesses in their community. And I believe that there is fair share of what needs to be paid comes through property taxes when it relates to the lodging industry. So I thank you for listening. I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dougal. Any questions to members of the committee? I just have a question, Mr. Dougal. You talked about Massachusetts, and do you know what the lodging tax is? Like it's say in the city of Boston, do they have a local lodging tax there or county tax, or is it just a state lodging tax for Massachusetts?
I used to have that committed to memory. It certainly is in double digits. They have the highest ability to create a larger local options tax. So it's pretty close to 14% as I remember it. But of course, Boston also uses that funding for things like transportation, ballparks, convention centers and things like that, which we're not proposing in this legislation.
But I mean, couldn't we do that? Like, couldn't the city of Portland, for instance, use money for those kind of things? I know we're not nearly the size of Boston, but I'm just, I don't, I remember staying in Boston like a couple years ago, and I believe the receipt for the lodging had like a breakdown of, I believe, a local tax, it might have been a county tax and a state tax, and all combined, I think was, like you said, around 14% or something. And I didn't even think twice about it when I stayed there. I didn't even know about it till after I got the bill. But they're able to do a lot of things in the city with that revenue, and Portland being on a smaller scale, could do things on a smaller scale perhaps if they had revenue like that, but obviously we don't right now.
I have not seen the amendment. I asked Ms. Jones if it was available, so I have not been able to read it, so I don't know what's in it. Certainly, if Representative Sylvester were willing to look at tourism promotion type of activities, maybe that would bring a different approach from my membership.
So like some of the
But
money,
I have not seen that yet.
right? So you're saying if some of the money went toward tourism promotion to help bring more tourists here, that'd be something you would support?
That is not an unusual thing that occurs in many communities, to be honest with you. And it isn't just tourism promotion. It would also be infrastructure as well that could be helped, like a Hadlock Field kind of thing. Maybe that's not the appropriate selection, but something in that, in that vein.
Sure. Kickoff was last night for the first game.
Yeah, and they lost big, unfortunately.
Oh no. Representative Terry has a question.
That's a bummer. I'm sorry to hear that. I was so excited. I'm very excited to see another baseball game. It's been a long time. Hi, Mr. Dougal. How are you?
Very good, Representative.
I think you know that I'm a big fan of this idea, and having been in the restaurant business for a very long time, it doesn't feel like it makes a big difference on my bill what my tax is. I send my tip out on the total bill, and I think most people do it that way as well. And I think know that the tax, all the restaurants, all of the hotels are collecting tax for the state or for whatever. I think I have to I guess my question for you is, do you have maybe evidence? I don't know if evidence is the right word, but anecdotal anyway, about other places that do charge local option taxes for hotels where it's been a detriment to their tourism business. And I ask this because I was lucky enough to go to New Orleans this past weekend. And just looking at my bill right now, the taxes that I was charged were well over 20% of my total bill. I know that New Orleans, again, is a big city, sees all kinds of things that maybe Portland or Bar Harbor or even Bangor don't. But 20% is, I feel like it's sort of my share of helping helping keep me safe while I'm there. So I'm wondering really if there's any anecdotal or otherwise evidence that a higher tax for lodging is detrimental to the industry itself.
Well, there's certainly a study that I've presented, I think, at least 5 times to this committee that was done nationally that equates a 1.5% decrease in business activity as it relates to a 1-point increase in taxes. And I will find that again and get that to the committee for your work session. And so, I don't have anything specific that says that, but I can tell you that I know that the taxes in New Orleans are definitely broken down around convention center facilities, and it's not something that goes directly towards, things like housing and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure some of the general tax and the state tax does, and I certainly understand why that is important. But most of that breakdown is for tourism infrastructure buildups. And the other thing is, as it relates to the individual business, every year when prices go up and business gets better, and we hope that it will. I mean, it was doing pretty good in 2019, so we're hoping that it'll return to those levels again sometime soon. The state gets an automatic bump, because the price of the product goes up and the percentage of tax on that product stays the same, and the state gets more money. And that's great. I mean, that's the way that it should work. But businesses generally on the bottom line get the same amount because costs increase. We're all seeing how much food costs are increasing. Everything is increasing, paper towel, toilet paper, and double-digit increases. So, the business community is making less money. And of course, they made no money last year, or even, are in a negative situation, but, they're making less money. And so it isn't really the time to be instituting something like this. I really believe that timing is everything, and this is not the time.
Thank you.
So Mr. Dougal, the current lodging tax in Maine is what, 9% or 10%?
9%, yes, sir.
And what was it before Governor LePage was governor? It was 8% or 7%?
Oh, you had to go there, huh? Well, it was 7, and then it was going to be 8 temporarily and go back to 7, and instead it went to 9. So,
okay, so it was 7, right? It was 7%, and then it went to 9% under Governor LePage. I don't know if he signed the budget or let it become law without his signature, but under his governorship, the lodging tax was increased from 7 to 9%. Do you have any evidence at all, looking at the industry across the state, of any loss in business as a result of that increase?
There's been no studies. Oh, sorry. Excuse me, sir.
That you can bring to the committee. I mean, I'm just wondering if there was any information that you could bring maybe for the work session that would show any loss of business when it was increased by 2% from 7 to 9.
I'm not aware of anything, but I will look very hard to see if I can find something. I believe the work session is Tuesday. Is that correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm not aware of any. I just didn't know if you had any information on that. Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us. Good to see you again.
Thanks, sir. Take care. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. So we'll now hear from James Kitchen to speak in opposition, followed by Joshua Tardy. Welcome, Mr. Kitchen.
Hi there. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak and have you guys listen to me today. Appreciate it very much. I haven't worn a tie in almost a year, so I am wearing a tie in your honor. And I hope that puts a smile on your face as well. So,
all right.
Thank you. Yes, I am speaking in opposition. I urge the committee to vote, ought not to pass on both of these measures. Specifically, my testimony is relative to 1342. I am part of a company that works in the lodging industry, and the businesses, the lodging businesses are already putting their fair share towards the costs of the state and the towns, and we feel like you're singling us out to do more when there's others that aren't doing any. So I would ask that we not allow local taxes to be imposed on our industry. We'd be concerned about competitive disadvantage, not only from comparing us to outside the state of Maine, but if we have hotels in Rockland, and if Rockland imposed a local option tax and Camden didn't, that's a competitive disadvantage for us. And I hear that you guys think that 1% is not very much and that we should just kind of roll over and go. But, our industry suffered tremendously last year. I know all of you are aware of it. We have a 65%-ish drop in our main hotels for Main Course Hospitality Group, which resulted in a over 85% loss in profit. So that loss in profit was in fact a loss. We did not make money. We froze payrolls. We begged for help with our vendors and for our lenders to give us an opportunity to help us get through till when business starts picking up, and it's just now starting to pick up again. And I'm asking that you guys don't put an additional burden on top of us. Greg pointed out all of the percentages of what other states are charging. This will put us the 6th highest lodging tax across the country, and just it's kind of scary. So I'll stop there. I appreciate your listening. I know that you guys are busy. I know that you have the best interests of all Mainers in your heart, and I hope that you will help us get back on our feet again. And I'll happy to answer any questions that I have information about.
Any questions from members of the committee? Mr. Kitchen, you just made reference to this. Under this, Maine would become the 6th highest in the country. And I mean, I've stayed in Chicago, San Diego, Boston, a few places in Florida, New Orleans, Phoenix, Arizona, multiple different places. And it seemed like all the places that I've stayed in these cities as I traveled all had a higher combined lodging tax between the local, county, and state lodging tax together combined, higher than what it would be under this bill. So unless those places are the only ones, the only 6 places or something that is named off, that have a higher combined tax, that mean there'd be no other places in the country that would have a combined higher tax. I don't know if that data includes state, local, and county, or it's just looking at the state.
It's just it would strictly be lodging related tax. So some of the other taxes that get added on to city taxes and things like that, I think Greg Dougal spoke to that just moments ago, that those are typically things that are for convention center support. They're for infrastructure that helps tourism and travel and things like that. So those are not things that have been proposed within this legislation. So this is really about the towns figuring out a way to get more revenue. And there's already a bill, LD 328, that's come out of the Senate, and hopefully it'll get passed, that fully funds the revenue sharing. And so I would point to that as being a more appropriate way for communities to have everybody contribute, as opposed to just individual businesses and or industries.
Okay. Just to be clear, the data of us being the 6th highest should this pass is only looking at undesignated funds. So in all of these other places where I've stayed, where the combined tax was higher, is because some of those taxes were designated to certain things, and that's what made it have a higher combined tax. But if the taxes that are broken down on the bill are not designated, that's the only thing we'd be looking at in terms of this statistic of being the 6th highest in the country should the bill pass.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. So a lot, some places have marketing taxes and some other things that, again, go for local promotion of, city of Burlington has, Burlington, Vermont has something like that, that funds are used to help market that city for tourism related businesses. So those kinds of things I'm not including in my numbers, because those are, designated, more for specific support of the tourism industry.
Right, but they are specifically charged to people that are lodging in those locations. It's on the bill for lodging. It's not on a bill for other things people buy when they're there. So it is specific to lodging, even though the money's designated for certain things.
That is, it is correct that they are specific to lodging. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Question from Representative Terry.
Just a quick question, in the other properties that you know of all over the country, on the receipt, on the bill, does it say where specifically the tax goes to? Like, does the customer know where the tax goes to?
So, I can't speak for all of the, locations, but I do know that for a number of the brand hotels, so like Hilton's or Marriott's and things like that, the brand requires specific designation of what the breakdown is. Some states require that, some municipalities require that. As a customer, as a client or a guest, I would want to know all of those things as well.
Do you think that that's an average of people? I mean, I am the chair of the taxation committee and I don't look on my receipts to see what that is. I'm just wondering if that's something that you find that people ask, generally speaking, when they're just when they're a customer coming into a place of where that money goes to. And I think what I'm getting to is the specifics of what your bill says. Is it something that is generally opposed to by guests going to a place and staying in a hotel?
So I think that places that have some of those, like the city of Burlington, we operate a hotel there, a Hilton Garden Inn, and so the marketing tax, if you will, fee that is on there, if a guest challenges that, it's removed from the bill. So it's from a consumer standpoint, I will encourage you to scrutinize your bill to make sure that you're actually being charged what you should be charged. And if you have a question about what is being charged on the bill, I would offer you to ask up the question because some of them could be optional. And I can't speak to all of them, but all of us need to be savvy and protect our own pocketbook, I think, as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Representative Colling has a question.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Kitchen. Thank you for being here. And I do genuinely wish you the best of luck with your hotel. I think things are going to get better and business will pick up. And I'm glad you've been able to make it. And I hope you have a lot of continued success. I do want to ask a couple quick questions just about this the lodging industry. As you just heard referenced earlier, if you were listening to past comments before you spoke, the lodging rate went from 7 to 8 to now 9%. And just recently, with the last data that was analyzed, it showed that from 2008 to 2019, that there was a positive increase in overnight lodging stays in the state of Maine. So it seems that as the tax rate went up, actually more lodging increased. And I'm wondering if it were to increase only in communities where they overwhelmingly wanted it to help with costs that weren't being covered by other sources, do you think that somehow now that would cause a decrease? And then second of all, I know that places like Portland, where I reside, I don't know if it's still the case, but not too long ago, I saw a national story that we, in the summertime, had the second highest average cost for a hotel in the country. I think maybe somewhere around Martha's Vineyard or somewhere around there, somewhere in coastal Massachusetts was first. Yet there was more hotels are being built. There's an increase in lodging here. So when people come to visit Maine, do you think they're coming because of looking at lodging rates, or are there other characteristics that you think they're really coming to Maine to visit?
Well, certainly, Maine is a desirable destination. I guess I would say that the increase in occupancy, if that's what you're referring to, as far as the increase in activity in the state, we've worked really hard with the Office of Tourism. They've worked really hard in bringing people to the state of Maine. And so I would say that we've been successful in doing that. And so, there's the old adage about killing the golden goose that lays the egg. So I'd be careful. And I ask you to consider that, where we are, and, are there other more appropriate ways for the communities, to be able to fund the items that they feel that they need to do. Having the state pay their full share of, revenue sharing, that would be an interesting concept.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us, Mr. Kitchen. It's been a great conversation. We'll now hear from Joshua Tardy, followed by Kate Foy. Welcome, Mr. Tardy. Good to see you.
Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and distinguished committee members. I'm Joshua Tardy. I'm a resident of Newport, Maine. I'm a lobbyist with the firm of Mitchell Tardy Jackson Government Affairs. And today I'm standing in for Allison Soucy, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the Maine Tourism Association. The Maine Tourism Association is the largest advocacy organization for the tourism sector. We represent lodging, restaurant, and a panoply of interests within this sector. And Mr. Chair, this is the sector that's squarely in the crosshairs of these two bills. And I offer this testimony today in opposition to both LDs 1342 and 1418. Allison Soucy, Mr. Chair, has submitted written testimony, and I'm not going to read the testimony to you, but I would I'd ask the committee to please refer to Allison's written testimonial. I think it hits some of the important data points. And also, if I may, to follow custom and protocol, Mr. Chair, as a former member of this taxation committee, I will make sure that your committee clerk has an appropriate gift certificate for candies at a local Augusta owned candy store, or Hollowell candy store, actually owned by former Representative Kim Davis, so that when we're all together again and you can safely obtain the product and recklessly consume it, I'll have paid my customary tribute. But look, the tourism industry has been the hardest hit in the pandemic. And I think the previous speaker referred to, the golden egg, and why would you want to put the tourism sector any more in the crosshairs? And I'm thinking about back when I first came to the legislature in 2002 and started serving. Before I got there, the cause du jour was educational funding and municipal funding as well, but it was the Pulaski initiatives. And when I got to the legislature, I was part of rural coastal bipartisan caucuses, and we wanted to raise sales taxes, or at least have that discussion as a way to limit property taxation. And then we moved over the next decade into the using revenue neutrality issues and PowerPoint presentations to justify sales tax increases to reduce income taxes. And now we're certainly seeing, with municipal shortfalls, another discussion about macro tax policy. And we all have been around for many of these local option debates. And I will just say that the myth of exportability is a myth. And we know that Mainers coming out of this pandemic are going to be payers of this this additional revenue. And this is the worst time to go forward. And it's the fact that, this taxation committee and this legislature is considering passing it off to local voters under the guise of local control. For sure, this is a macro issue, and it's a very dangerous time to be talking about additional revenues. And there are other vehicles, but I mean, to solve the municipal revenue shortfall, let's just be real. The Appropriations Committee and the budget need to start accepting the recommendations of this committee as it relates to revenue sharing, and needs to understand the service center's need and make it a priority in the budget making process. But the local option is a fascinating debate, and we've all been in front of in the past, the NCSLs in the panel discussions about tax policy. But I would just say that right now, this is a revenue tool that's going to be borne by Maine taxpayers and the businesses that are struggling coming out of a very, very trying time. It's tough to talk about the decrease in revenues as a relation to tax policy right now because everyone's decreased. I think there was a headline in one of today's papers that talks about the tourism sector is down 27% as a result of the pandemic. So causation arguments are kind of tough to look at right now. So it's very speculative. But for a panoply of reasons, Mr. Chair, I oppose both of these vehicles, and it is good to see you and fellow committee members.
Great, thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? So with your experience in the past serving on taxation, and you just talked about revenue sharing, and a few people have talked about that as well in their testimony. I mean, where would you propose the money come from for additional sustainable revenue for the state to be able to adequately fund revenue sharing and education and the things that people support? If we're not looking at taxing on lodging or meals or anything, where should the money come from for that? I guess.
With respect, Senator, the question admits defeat. I'm not necessarily sure. It's going to be a revenue problem. It's a priorities issue, a priorities debate, and it has to be done in the context of biennial budget and how are we going to spend, for example, the federal relief that's coming. There's plenty of revenue there to solve the problems as long as the legislature collectively makes the decision.
So some cuts would have to be made. Then. I mean, essentially, if we're not going to raise more revenue and to fund things properly, we'd have to make cuts. I mean, it's just, everybody wants the services, but then everyone says, well, raise income tax, raise lodging tax, raise, this tax or that tax to pay for it, or nobody wants to propose a particular, to pay for things. And I think it's just easy to point to other things like revenue sharing to try to get the heat off from, this particular issue, but it just, that's not a solution in my mind if we're not proposing something specific as a way to pay for revenue sharing or something specific that you would propose that we cut to cover the cost of things.
For sure, Senator, it's always tricky, especially in a representative democracy. You deal with a rural perspective on spending priorities and a more populated or urban perspective, service centers versus rural. And it's not a partisan issue. It's almost a territorial geographic issue sometimes.
Well, but even I mean, I serve on transportation committee. I mean, even on the issue of transportation, I mean, I think everybody supports better roads and bridges. I know they're in rough shape, but then nobody wants to agree on whether we should raise the gas tax or something else to pay for it. So it just doesn't get done, And I think we all want, the good roads, but we can't agree on how to pay for it, But anyway,
you and I have been part of that debate when we've debated and passed bond packages. And you asked the prior person that was testifying, do you want good roads? Of course. And sometimes that's why a bonded dollar should go more into roads and bridges and not to a bike path.
Okay, appreciate that. We have a question from Representative Collins.
Good morning, Josh. Thanks for being here. Good to see you. I was going to ask, in your opinion, with the work you do here in the tourism sector and the state economy over the years, we've had a record growth up until this pandemic. We're starting to see signs of rebounding. I mean, anytime I got to take a child to an appointment or pick something up downtown, I just see more and more people starting to flow back on the streets of Portland any day of the week from all types of out-of-state license plates everywhere. So we're seeing some uptick in activity. Do you believe that once things are safer, that growth in tourism is going to continue in Maine?
Good to see you, Representative, and I sure hope so. My optimism for Maine is one that I think is shared, and we can only hope. But to be clear, there's a tipping point, and you just can't keep piling on taxation. Because I'm sure, as you know, Representative, there are national studies out there that talk about there is a causal impact if you increase costs on a consumer's choice. At some point, you're going to change that consumer behavior.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us, Mr. Tardy. Good to see you. So we will now hear from Kate Foy, followed by Linda Caprera.
Just promoted them. I think Kate is with us first. Yes, there we go.
Good morning. No matter how many times it happens, that like cyberspace transition is always a little scary. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. You've heard a lot. I think I just, instead of reading my testimony, which I submitted this morning, I will just keep it to a couple of points. For those watching, my name is Kate Foy. I'm the Legislative Liaison for the Department of Economic and Community Development, and I'm here today to present testimony in opposition of LD 1342 as well as LD 1418. I think today I'll just keep my comments focused on how this could impact, it would be a tax increase on Mainers, not just on tourists. So in 2020, the state of Maine experienced an increase in residents traveling within the state. When they did, they stayed in hotels, motels, inns, campgrounds, etc. By enacting a local option lodging tax, we'll be raising taxes not only on non-residents, but on those Maine residents who opted to travel within the state to support our local businesses. Given the research that the Maine Office of Tourism has done, we anticipate many Mainers will continue to travel within the state in 2021, and this tax will impact them in a year when revenue projections have been adjusted upwards. Maine residents who vacation within the state may become frustrated with having to pay higher taxes. And then just speaking specifically to LD 1418, by adding a local option sales tax on restaurants, every Mainer who goes out to eat to dinner is paying that tax. Whether you're getting takeout, ordering pizza from a local pizza shop, grabbing a cup of coffee at a local coffee shop, or sitting down at a family restaurant, Mainers would be paying that additional tax. Other information is included in my testimony, and happy to take any questions if the committee has any.
Thank you, Ms. Foy. We have a question from Representative Terry.
Maybe, yes, I guess, well, yes, I guess that's a question. Sort of. So I just want to maybe make clear for the department, I guess, that the tax would be not necessarily coming from a local coffee shop. This would be something that the voters of the town voted on first. So I guess I just want to make that clear, that it's not just somebody going to a coffee shop.
Right, but people perhaps who voted against that local option sales tax in a community, if it passed, when they went out to eat, would then be subject to the tax, correct?
Correct.
Or if you lived in another town and you went to eat out, say for instance, Portland, voted for the local option sales tax, and I live in Brunswick, so in Brunswick, maybe we didn't vote for that. If I went out to eat in Portland, I'd be subject to the increased tax, but if I stayed in Brunswick and ate, I would not.
Right. But you would also be adding to the population for a short period of time as
correct.
well.
And I understand, I serve on the town council in Brunswick now. We are wrapping up our budget process. We were excited to see the revenue forecasting. It helps us offset property taxes. So I certainly understand the struggle, but given the work we have done with the hospitality industry and all that we've seen, at this time, increasing tax, I know we talk about increasing tax, that we went from 7 to 9%, and that didn't make a difference. But I guess the question is, we don't know when it does make a difference until it happens. And if we keep increasing, we may not know what that tipping point is. And I think Mr. Tardy addressed that very well.
But Ms. Foy, I mean, that could be, if it went up, if the local town agreed to adopt this and it went up to say 1%, went to 10% in that town, and it made any kind of difference, the town could also pull back on it, correct? I mean, there's that ability.
I would defer, right? I didn't write the legislation, so if that is something that is an option for the town to do, I wouldn't pretend to speak to that, just given that
originally the lodging tax was increased with a plan for it to go down and didn't go down. I think once you have the revenue, it's hard to take it back.
Right.
So
Right.
I think we've seen on a state level, the example of the plan was to do that, and then the state chose not to, which again is at the pleasure of the legislature. And so I couldn't speak for a town and whether they plan to lower it if all of a sudden they didn't need the funding.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with the turnpike. They were supposed to take away the tolls once the turnpike was paid for, and that never happened, but people still use the turnpike. So, I mean, the option's there, though. I just wanted to point out that the town could pull back on it if it made any kind of difference.
It's an excellent point.
I mean, the other thing, I mean, you talked about the data from 2020. I mean, that was a very, very strange year where people weren't traveling. They weren't flying on planes. They were doing things in state because that's all they could do to be safe, and there were all the quarantine requirements and all of that. I mean, I think that's very different than a regular year where my understanding is 90 or 95% of folks that stay in lodging are from out of state, like on a regular year, like 2019, 2018. And not that what you're saying won't continue in 2020, maybe it will, but I guess I would ask that if we were to build into this, like a state income tax credit for increased taxes paid by local option, if it's implemented in certain towns by Maine residents, if they could then take an income tax credit for whatever they paid in local option taxes for meals or lodging off their income tax, would that make a difference in terms of whether you would be willing to support the bill? Because then there would be no impact on them if they could get a credit for it.
I guess I think I would defer to MRS as to what the challenge is to create an income tax credit would be. And I can't, I guess I would defer to them, and then whether people would take the time to do that and feel like additional paperwork on their income taxes was something that they wanted to do. So I can't answer specifically around that. It's a thought. And I guess I would say we do a lot in the Maine Office of Tourism around part of what we do is go out in the market to see where trends are and what people are going to do so that we can plan and help support the tourism industry. And all of the research that we've done so far points to Mainers staying. They've rediscovered Maine. I certainly did last summer. I've just booked 2 vacations. So looking forward to some time off in July, and they're here in Maine. Where typically, I may not have done that before, but sort of rediscovered the state this past summer.
Right. And it is optional spending, just to Marie or to go out to eat. It's all completely discretionary. On the part of the-
Absolutely. I would hope we try not to make it inaccessible to as many families as we can by increasing taxes, but I agree it's absolutely optional spending. Been times in my life where things have been pretty tight and I have 3 kids, not always easy to take them out to eat.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this bill, both of these bills is where it's optional. Some towns would do it, some towns wouldn't.
Yep.
In-state residents
Absolutely.
choose to go to a town, like maybe they'd go out to eat in Brunswick where they may not have it versus Portland, and might actually be good for Brunswick. So, it could be interesting to see
We
how
have
that
great
works.
restaurants in Brunswick. Member of the town council, love to have more people come here and eat out.
That's my hometown. I love the Great Pasta and some other places.
Yeah.
There, so. We have a question from Representative Kryzak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Forgive me, I'm driving, but I'm hands-free, folks. I was just reminded, I brought up the constitutionality when we were discussing the marijuana, and I was corrected, and I understand that now. But I'm remembering now from when the former mayor of Portland came in several bills like this. Only the legislature can are unconstitutional because so I would like for the work session information on whether these are constitutional or not, because my understanding is the legislature cannot give their the right to tax away to somebody else. So I think both of these cannot be passed anyways. Thank you.
Well, Representative Kryzak, I believe the state would collect the money, if I'm not mistaken, and give it back to the towns. So it's not like the town collecting money directly. So I think that's how.
No. What I'm saying is only we can tax the legislature. You're giving the right to tax to towns and cities, and we cannot do that under the Constitution.
Okay. Well, we can look into that for the work session. Any additional questions from members?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Foy. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank
We'll
you.
now
I'll
hear-
see you again in a couple more bills.
Okay. We'll now hear from Linda Caprera, followed by Steve DeMillo. Welcome, Ms. Caprera. Good to see you.
Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, members of the committee. My name is Linda Caprera. I'm a resident of Winthrop, and I'm also a town councilor in Winthrop. And I represent the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. We are in opposition to both of these bills, LD 1342 and LD 1418. We've long opposed local option sales taxes for a number of reasons. First, enacting a local option sales tax increases the total tax burden in the state of Maine. It adds another layer of sales tax to items purchased in municipalities that enact it. Local option sales taxes are nothing more than another way to raise revenue for municipalities and would do nothing to reduce taxes at the local level. Municipalities need to focus on spending efficiencies. And I know that because I am a town councilor. It's very important. Number two, and the local option taxes hurt small brick and mortar businesses. Many folks buy local or they support local businesses in their municipalities. You know, enacting a local option sales tax in one municipality will just have folks compete with another. I mean, this is overall. Businesses located in towns that enact local option sales taxes will be at a competitive disadvantage with businesses and municipalities that do not enact that. It's really pits one community against another. And I think that's why a lot of folks, it is a rural and it's a service center issue because a lot of folks do not want this. Once local option sales taxes are enacted, it's very difficult to erase that source of revenue. Number three, local option sales taxes impact local economic development efforts. Municipalities around the state try hard to attract businesses to their municipalities. Many hire economic development directors to do just that. This will do nothing to attract businesses, but discourage businesses from locating in towns that have additional taxes. This bill will make towns that impose sales taxes less attractive to locate to. Once local option taxes are in place, it would be virtually impossible to remove them because that municipality would be dependent upon that revenue. I think some of the things that we heard today, you know, we would encourage you folks to look at other ways. Fully funding municipal revenue sharing, I think that's huge. We have an enormous amount